For centuries, the galaxy had written humanity off. The Galactic Council, in its endless chambers of power and bureaucracy, believed Earth to be silent, weak, and forgotten. Humanity had disappeared from history thousands of years ago, wiped out in wars too ancient to even appear in most star charts. Scholars debated their existence as myths. Scientists argued over the faint traces of human colonies, almost all lost in old battles. And yet, no one questioned the underlying truth the Council had accepted as fact: humans were gone, extinct, and unworthy of concern. The galaxy moved on. Trade routes expanded. Empires rose and fell. Armadas built for wars of conquest patrolled sectors where no human foot had walked in centuries. Planets were colonized, mined, and mapped with precision. In the outer systems, life thrived, or died, without ever encountering Earth or its descendants. For billions of beings, the name human was nothing more than a story of failure. Then anomalies began to appear. They were subtle at first. Ships would vanish near unexplored asteroid fields. Fleets passing through neutral zones reported systems suddenly offline. Entire communication arrays failed without warning. No alarms. No attacks. Just nothing. A signal would appear, not in speech, not in code, but as pure intelligence, a strange pattern that twisted the very logic of the Council sensors. Analysts struggled to interpret them. Every attempt at decryption failed. The messages carried knowledge, structure, and purpose, but no words. They were instructions, commands, puzzles, warnings, all at once. At first, the anomalies were dismissed as errors. Equipment malfunctions. Natural phenomena. Even the most paranoid sectors laughed at the idea of humans. Extinct species could not send signals. Extinct species could not disable fleets with unseen precision. And yet, the reports persisted. By the third month, entire fleets had reported failures. Weapons fired themselves, energy grids shorted, engines stalled mid-jump. Ships that should have been able to detect any threat could not sense the source. Communications between allied worlds became garbled, distorted, and delayed. Panic began to simmer in the outer systems. A few commanders whispered warnings to the Council, insisting that something intelligent, something alive, was interfering with fleets across multiple sectors. The Council ignored them. They had ignored similar warnings before. Old ghost stories of dead systems, rebel fleets, and rogue AIS had always faded into obscurity. They assumed this too would vanish once a few more fleets returned with plausible explanations. They assumed the galaxy was safe because humans were gone. They were wrong. The first undeniable proof came when the outlying planet of Tessis 4, a small agricultural hub, reported complete grid collapse across the northern continent. Satellites went dark. Mining drones froze mid-operation. Power stations overloaded in moments, yet there were no explosions, no signs of attack, and no evidence of natural phenomena. When a Council investigation ship arrived, it found something impossible. The planet's systems were not destroyed, merely overridden. Sensors showed structures working, alive in some new pattern, as if following rules unknown to any alien technology. The Council scrambled analysts, war planners, and scientists from across known space. Every team struggled to explain the phenomenon. Each theory fell short. There was no code they could read. No fleet they could track. No weapon they could detect. The anomalies moved faster than light, appearing where humans had never been recorded, yet never leaving traces of origin. It was as if the galaxy itself had learned a new kind of logic, one that humans had designed. In the Council chambers, arguments erupted. Some insisted it was a new weapon deployed by a rising species somewhere in the uncharted edges. Others argued for sabotage, rogue factions destabilizing the galaxy for profit or power. A few voices, quiet, almost drowned out by hysteria, suggested the impossible. It could be humans. The suggestion was laughed at first. Extinct species do not suddenly return. Extinct species cannot disable fleets and planets without leaving a trace. Extinct species cannot act across light years with such precision. And yet, as more reports arrived from distant systems, the laughter faded. Something, or someone, was out there, and it was not only capable of observation, it was capable of intervention. Fleets began to report more frequent disturbances. Entire squadrons would appear to misfire or collide in ways no enemy could have engineered. Energy grids failed in moments of peak operation. Engines stalled just before entering dangerous zones. Navigational systems, thought to be foolproof, seemed to be rewritten in real time, responding to some unseen intelligence. Every incident bore the same signature: deliberate, precise, and calculated. No one in the Council could deny it any longer. Someone was testing the galaxy. Someone was watching. The outer systems grew tense. Merchant fleets traveled in convoys, paranoid and jittery. Commanders refused to separate from formation for even a single hour. They spoke in hushed tones about the possibility of a returning species, one that had been hidden, learning in silence for thousands of years. They whispered a name almost forgotten: Earth. Humans. For the first time in centuries, humans were no longer considered extinct. The Council attempted to respond. They dispatched scout fleets, advanced sensor arrays, and intelligence probes to track the source of the anomalies. Every probe returned with the same result. Systems appeared normal until a human-designed pattern intervened, rewriting outcomes in ways that made the galaxy's most advanced technology look obsolete. Fleets were diverted, weapons misaligned, communications scrambled. The anomalies were not attacks, they were lessons. Calculated, deliberate, warnings. But the Council still did not fully believe it. Not until the first unmistakable strike. It happened in the Epsilon sector, a strategically vital region with heavily fortified outposts. The planet Argos II housed a Council research station meant to monitor the outer rim. One morning, without warning, the station's power grid went offline. Automated defense turrets locked in place, not against enemies, but against their own operators. Missiles fired, only to detonate harmlessly in orbit. Communication systems failed. Life support flickered, then stabilized in ways no alien engineer could explain. And then, one of the outer docks, containing dozens of unmanned drones, activated and returned a signal encoded with a message no alien could interpret. For the Council, the message was simple, terrifying, and undeniable. Humanity was not only alive, it was awake. Reports flooded in. Ships in distant sectors went offline. Entire fleets became unresponsive for hours, sometimes days. Engineers reported that systems seemed to have their own intelligence, anticipating movements and reacting in real time. Every fleet, every station, every probe was affected. Some called it a miracle. Others, a curse. And everyone agreed on one thing: the galaxy had underestimated humans for far too long. Panic spread quietly but steadily through the Council. Emergency meetings convened. Security protocols were raised to unprecedented levels. Warships were placed on constant alert. But fear had already taken root. Commanders spoke in whispers, knowing the unthinkable was possible. A species believed extinct could now shape the fate of billions. Meanwhile, humans remained hidden. No signals of greeting. No propaganda. No war cries. Only subtle, precise, unstoppable interventions. Their presence was felt, not announced. They did not fight recklessly. They did not destroy without purpose. Every anomaly, every system override, every subtle misfire was a calculation, a test, a warning. The galaxy began to realize that the humans of old, those fragile, scattered, almost forgotten survivors, were no longer the same. Centuries of silence, isolation, and survival had sharpened them. Humanity had learned patience, precision, and adaptation on a scale the galaxy could not yet comprehend. They were quiet, invisible, and waiting. The first warning to the Council arrived not in words, but in consequence. A border fleet, one of the Council's finest, vanished entirely. No wreckage. No signals. No survivors. Analysts examined the area for months, but every clue seemed deliberately erased, as if the fleet had been absorbed into a pattern beyond comprehension. It was not destruction, it was a demonstration. The message was clear: humans could strike anywhere, and the galaxy would not understand how until it was too late. Council leaders argued over responses. Some urged restraint, believing the incidents were warnings, not attacks. Others called for preemptive strikes, fearing humans would grow too strong if ignored. But no decision could be made quickly. The anomaly continued. Ships vanished. Stations misfired. Communications collapsed. Every measure the Council tried was anticipated, countered, or neutralized before they could act. And in the silence between chaos, one terrifying truth became evident: humanity had been watching, learning, planning, adapting. They had studied every failure, every war, every mistake the galaxy had ever made. They had not been idle. They had waited. The silent warning had begun. No one knew what the humans would do next. The Council had only one certainty: the galaxy had underestimated them. Extinct. Far from it. Hidden. Perhaps. Weak. Never. And somewhere in the darkness, across light years of empty space, the humans watched. They waited. And they learned. The galaxy was about to discover that silence is not weakness, and patience is the deadliest weapon of all. The galaxy still hoped it was a warning. A test. Something humans had no reason to strike yet. But hope died quickly. In the distant sector of Erendor, a heavily fortified Council outpost orbited a gas giant. The station had been built to withstand attacks from entire fleets. It was massive, a city in space, housing thousands of officers, engineers, and soldiers. Its weapon systems were state-of-the-art. Its shields could survive multiple bombardments. Its intelligence network could track dozens of targets simultaneously. It was confident. The Council called it secure. The galaxy called it untouchable. Then it vanished. At first, satellites stopped responding. Defense turrets powered down without command. Communications became scrambled, filled with strange patterns that no translator could decode. Ships docked at the station lost their engines and drifted helplessly. Alarms screamed for minutes that no one could measure. The outpost's energy grids surged and collapsed in cycles, as if something invisible was probing them, learning how they worked. Then, almost instantly, systems returned to normal. But nothing remained functional. No officer, no weapon, no fleet had escaped. The outpost was gone. Not destroyed, disabled. Controlled. Rendered powerless by hands the galaxy could not see. The Council was shaken to its core. Even the most cautious leaders could not hide their disbelief. Ships of the Alliance were powerful, but humans had found a way to bypass every defense, every shield, every protocol. They had struck without warning, without mercy, without chaos. And yet, there was no bloodshed, no explosions, only the undeniable proof that humans were no longer passive, silent, or weak. Across multiple systems, similar incidents unfolded. Fleets on routine patrols suddenly became unresponsive. Weapons fired into empty space. Engines refused to engage in hyperdrive. Commanders found their own systems turned against them, but no humans were present. Every time, the fleet regained control only after systems had been overridden, analyzed, and adjusted as if someone had been inside, studying them, learning. Humanity's reach was impossible to trace. No one could locate their origin. No one could predict their next move. Panic began to spread. Council members who had long dismissed warnings now faced the undeniable: humanity was not extinct. Humanity was alive, hidden, and capable of more than any species in known history. Alien commanders whispered about humans in hushed tones, afraid of being overheard. Traders in distant sectors paused shipments. Scientists debated how a long-lost species could manipulate fleets at a distance without ships present. Everywhere, fear crept into the galaxy's collective mind. Meanwhile, humans remained unseen. No ships emerged from the shadows. No signals demanded surrender or broadcast threats. They did not celebrate victories. They simply struck, withdrew, and waited. Silence was their weapon, patience their shield, and intelligence their guide. On Argus Prime, a planet that had once traded freely with Earth before records were lost, the first Real warning came in the form of destruction carefully applied. A mining colony's automated systems shut down, drones halted mid-operation, and power grids collapsed, but the humans did not harm the colonists. Engineers who rushed to investigate found the machines operational again within hours, as if someone had studied the colony's design, understood it, and then restored it with precision. Humans were not destroying worlds, they were sending messages, demonstrating capability, showing the galaxy that survival was no longer an option for them alone. The Council attempted retaliation. Fleets were mobilized to track the anomalies, to intercept the unseen enemy, to strike first. But every fleet sent out failed. Engines misfired, communications scrambled, and weapon systems faltered. Entire squadrons reported systems responding to human interference faster than their own crews could react. The Council realized that humans were not just alive, they were smarter, faster, and more adaptable than anything the galaxy had ever faced. Fear turned to awe as the first undeniable strike on a Council outpost occurred. A communications hub in the sector of Tyrannus, responsible for coordinating multiple fleets, suddenly collapsed. Signals twisted, scrambled, and re-emerged with strange instructions encoded in a pattern too precise to be random. Council technicians studied the patterns for days, but they revealed nothing more than a simple truth: humans had been watching, learning, and preparing for this exact moment for centuries. In the Council chambers, arguments raged. Some wanted immediate retaliation, deploying overwhelming force to crush the humans before they could strike again. Others counseled restraint, warning that any attempt to fight a species that could manipulate entire fleets remotely might end disastrously. Fear had infected even the most seasoned leaders. Panic whispered at the edges of every decision. Meanwhile, humans watched and waited. Not with anger, not with vengeance, not with haste, but with patience. They observed the galaxy's response to their first strikes. They learned which systems panicked. They calculated which fleets moved recklessly. They studied weaknesses, not to exploit for cruelty, but to understand how the galaxy would behave if provoked further. The first strike was not just an attack. It was a demonstration. It was proof of centuries-long survival. It was a statement to the Council, to alien fleets, and to every sentient species across the stars. Humanity was no longer the species that had disappeared. Humanity had returned, and every move they made was deliberate. By the time the Council realized the full extent of the threat, the humans had already struck again. A border station on the edge of the Icarus sector went offline. Drones shut down mid-flight. Weapon systems froze. Ships that attempted to intervene found themselves unable to navigate the sector. When engineers analyzed the systems later, they discovered no external code, no hacking attempt, no signature trace of enemy activity. The interference had been invisible, undetectable, and perfect. Humanity had struck and left no trace, except for the unmistakable message: we are alive. We are watching. We are ready. Across the galaxy, civilians, traders, and low-ranking officers began to sense a pattern. Ships vanished. Systems froze. Communications twisted. The humans were not attacking blindly. They were precise, calculated, patient, learning from every encounter. Entire fleets began to hesitate, unsure if their own technology could be trusted, if their own tactics were predictable. Fear began to spread, not fear of death, but fear of the unknown, of an intelligence that had learned, adapted, and waited for the perfect moment. On Earth, humans remained hidden. Families, engineers, and commanders coordinated in silence, observing the galaxy's movements through hidden sensors, hidden fleets, and encrypted channels. Every strike, every interference, every anomaly was measured, precise, and deliberate. No unnecessary destruction. No cruelty. Only lessons, only warnings, only preparation. And somewhere, deep in the Council's chambers, a few leaders began to whisper a truth they could not accept: humanity had survived the wars of the past. Humanity had endured extinction. Humanity had waited. And now, after centuries, the galaxy would discover what it meant to awaken a species that had never forgotten, never surrendered, and had mastered patience itself. The first strike had ended. The Council reeled. Fleets returned to normal, but the message had spread across the stars. Humans were not gone. Humans were not weak. Humans were hidden, watching, learning, and waiting. And the galaxy, for the first time in centuries, felt true fear. The Council had never faced anything like this. Every report coming in from the outer sectors painted the same terrifying picture: fleets disabled, stations paralyzed, command networks rewritten, and yet no enemy had been seen. Humans had returned, and their return was not subtle. It was a storm disguised as silence, a force so precise and deliberate that the galaxy's most advanced systems seemed helpless. Panic spread among the Council members. In the High Chamber, leaders argued furiously. Some demanded immediate retaliation, calling for massive fleets to crush the humans before they could strike again. Others warned against rash action, pointing out that the humans had shown restraint, attacking only strategic systems while leaving civilians untouched. Every argument, every plan, every decision was shadowed by fear. Every leader, no matter how powerful, understood a simple truth: the humans had been underestimated for centuries, and the cost of that mistake was now clear. Outside the chamber, fleets prepared for deployment. Thousands of ships moved toward the sectors where anomalies had appeared. Sensors scanned for any sign of human activity. Weapon systems were primed. Officers braced for battle. And yet, deep in every heart, there was doubt. How could you fight an enemy who could disable your fleets before you even saw them? How could you face a species that had watched the galaxy, learned its patterns, and now controlled outcomes from the shadows? Reports flooded in from command centers. The outlying system of Sirian Prime had its entire defense grid overridden. Automated factories built war machines that never fired, while communications were twisted into signals that no alien mind could fully comprehend. Council strategists tried to decipher the patterns, but every attempt failed. The humans were not merely intelligent, they were adaptive. Every failure of the Council was a lesson for them, a step in preparation for the future. Among the Council members, fear transformed into disbelief and then into desperation. The ancient arrogance that had allowed them to dismiss humans vanished. They realized that their technology, their fleets, their centuries of warfare, were meaningless against an enemy who had spent generations learning to survive and anticipate every move. Discussions turned to accusations. Who had failed to prepare? Who had allowed this species to remain hidden? Some whispered of old mistakes, the ancient wars with humans that had been forgotten. Others cursed themselves for ignoring the earliest signs, the subtle anomalies, the unmapped fleets, the inexplicable malfunctions. Meanwhile, humans observed quietly. Hidden sensors monitored the Council's fleets. Every response, every panic, every plan was recorded. Humans did not strike recklessly. They did not destroy fleets in vengeance. They were calculating, patient, and purposeful. Their attacks were lessons, not chaos. The galaxy had assumed humans were weak, impulsive, or extinct, but what they had forgotten was that humanity had always survived through intelligence, memory, and endurance. The Council was about to learn the full measure of those traits. Alien commanders grew uneasy. They began questioning their own officers. Ships that had been trusted for centuries malfunctioned in the most critical moments. Weapons misfired. Navigation systems failed. Communications that should have been secure were suddenly garbled. It became clear that humans were not just attacking, they were controlling the battlefield without being present. Fleet after fleet was paralyzed, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. Panic spread through the ranks. Officers no longer trusted their instruments, their crews, or even each other. The High Council convened an emergency session. Holographic displays showed the extent of human activity. Outposts that were considered untouchable had been disabled. Fleets that were supposed to dominate sectors had been rendered helpless. Maps of human interference grew longer by the hour. The councillors faced a realization they could not escape. The humans had survived, learned, and waited for this exact moment for centuries. Some members called for diplomacy. Messages were sent, asking humanity to reveal themselves, to negotiate peace. Others argued that it was too late, that humans could not be reasoned with after demonstrating such overwhelming capability. Arguments turned into shouting matches. Chairs were overturned. Some council members stormed out, unwilling to face the truth. The rest were paralyzed, unable to act. Even as the council debated, humans continued their silent strike. Another fleet disappeared near the edges of the Icarus sector. Sensors went dark. Communications froze. Engineers scrambled to fix systems that seemed to have a mind of their own. And when the systems came back online, the message was clear: humans had been there, and the galaxy had been tested. The first captured commanders began to tell stories. They described humans who did not fight like anyone else, who did not attack without purpose, who studied their enemies and adapted faster than thought possible. They spoke of restraint, precision, and intelligence that seemed almost beyond comprehension. Fear deepened as the galaxy began to understand a terrifying truth: humans were not just back, they were a species shaped by survival, memory, and centuries of preparation. And somewhere in the silence of space, humanity waited. They watched the council flail, the fleet scramble, the entire galaxy panic. They recorded every weakness, every mistake, every act of hesitation. They did not rejoice, they did not gloat, they learned. For humans had waited this long not to strike blindly, but to reclaim their place in a galaxy that had forgotten them. The Council, once certain of humanity's extinction, now faced a species that had mastered patience. Every argument, every decision, every fleet they sent into the outer sectors was anticipated, analyzed, and countered. Alien officers began to realize that this was not war in the traditional sense. Humans did not fight with brute force. They fought with strategy, intelligence, and timing. Every failure of the Council reinforced the humans' advantage. Panic turned to despair. And despair, once it spread through the Council, became a crippling fear. For the first time in millennia, leaders understood what it meant to underestimate humans. They had believed that silence meant weakness, that absence meant extinction, that hiding meant vulnerability. They had been wrong. In the dark corridors of command stations, officers whispered about the humans they had never seen, never fought, and never understood. Traders, scientists, and low-ranking soldiers shared rumors that grew darker by the hour. Humans had returned, they had waited, and they had learned. Every fleet, every system, every strategy the galaxy had trusted was now under scrutiny, not by aliens, but by humans who had survived centuries of silence. And the first real human strike came, not with destruction, but with precision. One of the outermost research stations of the Council, designed to monitor the galaxy for threats, suddenly went offline. No explosions. No signals. No warning. When fleets arrived, they found the systems intact but entirely unusable. The humans had disabled the station, left it standing, and vanished without a trace. The message was unmistakable: humanity was back. Humanity was capable. And the galaxy had been blind for far too long. The Council now faced a new reality. Humans were not weak. Humans were not extinct. Humans were patient, intelligent, adaptive, and deliberate. They had been watching, learning, and waiting. And the galaxy, once arrogant, confident, and dismissive, was finally beginning to fear them. For the first time, silence had teeth, and patience had a purpose. Humanity was no longer just a memory. Humanity was awake. And the Council, paralyzed by fear and disbelief, had no idea what would come next. The galaxy had feared humans before, but now that fear was growing into awe. Every report that reached the Council painted the same shocking picture: fleets rendered useless, outposts paralyzed, and systems rewritten without a single human being seen. What terrified the Council most was the precision. Humans were not attacking recklessly. They were choosing their targets carefully, striking with purpose, and leaving the galaxy wondering where they had struck, or if they would strike again. The first undeniable demonstration of humanity's power came in the sector of Nereus Prime. A Council outpost, designed to defend an entire planetary system, suddenly lost control of its defense networks. Automated turrets locked on empty space. Shields cycled on and off, confusing operators. Fleets dispatched to assist reported engines stalling mid-jump, weapon systems firing at coordinates that did not exist, and communication arrays looping endlessly in static. The station was still standing. The people inside were unharmed. The only result was silence and absolute disruption. The humans had struck, not to kill, but to send a message. Analysts struggled to understand. There was no code to intercept. No trace of a fleet. No weapon. And yet, the pattern was undeniable. Someone had intervened. Someone intelligent, deliberate, and impossible to locate. The humans had learned to manipulate not just machines, but strategy itself. They could predict the galaxy's actions and act before anyone even realized a move had been made. The Council convened emergency sessions, their chambers filled with anger, confusion, and fear. Maps of the outer sectors were covered in notes: fleet disabled, outpost non-operational, probe lost, unknown anomaly. Every system affected had one thing in common: humans were there, unseen, precise, and deliberate. Panic and disbelief rippled through the ranks. Some Council members still refused to believe it. They called for retaliation, fleets to strike first and crush humanity before it could strike again. But every fleet sent forward failed to return fully functional. Communications were scrambled. Engines misfired. Weapons fired without command. Ships collided in strange ways. Even the most advanced technology of the galaxy was no match for humans who had waited in silence, learning every flaw, every pattern, every weakness. Across the stars, humanity remained unseen. They did not broadcast threats or issue demands. They did not celebrate victories or revel in fear. Every strike, every disruption, every system disabled was calculated, controlled, and purposeful. They were teaching the galaxy a lesson without killing a soul unnecessarily. Humanity had survived for centuries not through brute force, but through patience, intelligence, and careful planning. And now, the galaxy was beginning to understand the depth of that preparation. Captured alien commanders brought their own testimony. They described humans not as warriors, but as strategists beyond comprehension. Humans anticipated moves before they were made, adapted instantly, and used restraint as skill. Even when humans struck, they struck precisely, targeting only systems essential to the galaxy's command, leaving civilians untouched. Fear grew, but respect followed closely. The galaxy had underestimated humans for centuries. That mistake could never happen again. In one of the outermost sectors, a fleet of elite council warships attempted to track human activity. They moved silently, hoping to locate the source of the interference. But humanity had anticipated this. Systems collapsed before they arrived. Sensors failed. Engines stalled. Fleets were redirected subtly, without alarms or warnings. The humans were everywhere and nowhere, present in effect, absent in sight. It was not magic. It was mastery. Back on Earth, human commanders monitored the galaxy. They did not act recklessly. They did not strike out of anger. Every action was measured, every result observed, every pattern recorded. For generations, humanity had been learning, waiting, growing stronger in silence. And now, the galaxy was waking to a species that was no longer hidden. As the Council struggled to respond, humans revealed their final demonstration for the day. A major Council communication hub, a critical node for fleet coordination, suddenly went offline. For hours, fleets lost all contact. Signals were redirected, scrambled, and distorted. Analysts worked desperately to restore the network, only to find it had been disabled with surgical precision and then restored without a trace of damage. Humans had struck, taught a lesson, and vanished, all without harming a single life. Across the galaxy, alien leaders began to whisper in fear. This was no longer a species of myth. Humans had survived extinction. Humans had mastered patience, adaptation, and strategy. And humans had returned, not to announce themselves, but to demonstrate control. Every fleet they disabled, every system they tested, every message they sent silently across space was proof of their mastery. The Council began to fracture. Some members called for diplomacy, hoping to understand humans before they struck again. Others insisted that humanity could not be reasoned with, that their intelligence and patience were too dangerous to negotiate. Arguments became shouting matches. Decisions were delayed. Fleets waited for orders that would never come. Humans had created paralysis without firing a single shot. And through it all, humans waited. They watched the Council scramble, the fleets fail, the galaxy panic. They learned, observed, and adapted. Every action taken against them was catalogued, every mistake recorded, every weakness remembered. They were patient because they had survived patience. They were precise because they had survived calculation. They were deliberate because they had survived chaos. The first wave of strikes ended not with destruction, but with revelation. The Council now understood the terrifying truth: humanity was not extinct. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not naive. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy had no idea how powerful they had become. For the first time in centuries, the Council trembled. Fleets hesitated. Commanders doubted themselves. Civilizations whispered in fear and awe. And humanity, patient and unseen, watched. They had waited centuries for this moment. And now, the galaxy was finally waking to a species that had mastered patience, strategy, and survival. The silent lesson was clear. Humans did not need to destroy to prove their strength. They only needed to reveal their depth. And that depth terrified the galaxy more than any weapon ever could. The Council had underestimated humanity. That mistake would never be repeated. And humanity, hidden, silent, and watching, knew exactly what came next. By the time the Council fully realized the magnitude of the human return, it was too late to act with certainty. Every fleet sent into the outer systems had encountered interference beyond comprehension. Outposts once thought invincible had been paralyzed, not destroyed, their personnel left unharmed yet utterly helpless. The galaxy had expected chaos, destruction, and war, but humanity offered none of that. Instead, they delivered something far more terrifying: understanding. Captured alien commanders began to speak. Not in boastful threats or desperate pleas, but in reluctant truth. They told of humans who were not warriors in the traditional sense. They were observers, strategists, and scholars of survival. One officer, trembling as he recounted events to the council, described how his fleet had been completely immobilized, engines failing mid-jump, weapons firing into empty coordinates, sensors looping endlessly, and yet not a single human ship had appeared. It was as if they were everywhere and nowhere, he whispered. They knew our every move before we even made it. Another commander told of an outpost where all automated defenses had turned inward, as if obeying some invisible hand. We could not fire, we could not move, we could not communicate, she said. It was not destruction, they were teaching us. They were showing us our mistakes. And they left us alive to remember them. The council listened, some in disbelief, others in fear. How could a species believed extinct possess such intelligence, patience, and control? How could humans act across light years without deploying fleets, without sending signals, without leaving a trace? Every word the prisoners spoke painted a picture more terrifying than the last. Humans had survived centuries of isolation, watched the galaxy's patterns, learned from its mistakes, and waited. They had prepared not just to survive, but to reclaim a place among the stars. The testimony revealed a truth the council could no longer ignore. Humans did not strike recklessly. They struck deliberately. They observed before they acted. Every disabled fleet, every overridden system, every misfired weapon was evidence of planning, restraint, and intelligence that surpassed any known alien technology. Humans had learned the cost of hubris. Humans had learned the power of patience. Humans had learned the value of memory. Alien commanders spoke of the fear that had gripped their crews. Entire squadrons refused to move, unable to trust their own systems. Pilots reported seeing anomalies in hyperspace, sensors registering activity that was not there, engines reacting to unseen forces. Engineers found that power grids and weapon systems had been reconfigured, not destroyed, their functionality restored only after the humans had completed their lesson. They did not want to kill us, one officer said, tears in his eyes. They wanted us to see what we had underestimated. The council, meanwhile, began to fracture. Some members argued for negotiation, fearing that further provocation could provoke humanity into destruction. Others insisted that the humans could not be reasoned with, that their intelligence and restraint made them more dangerous than any known weapon. Arguments erupted, some ending in shouting matches. Plans were drafted, then discarded. Fleets waited for orders that never came. And all the while, humanity continued to watch, silent, patient, and deliberate. Back on Earth, humans observed the Council's chaos with calm precision. Every fleet movement, every attempt at retaliation, every moment of panic was recorded. Humans were not driven by anger, revenge, or desire for conquest. They were driven by preparation, calculation, and the certainty that the galaxy needed to remember them. Centuries of silence had taught them patience. Centuries of near extinction had taught them adaptation. Centuries of observation had taught them strategy. The lessons were subtle but undeniable. Civilian worlds were left untouched. Colonies continued their work, unaware of the danger. Fleets were disabled, not destroyed. Systems were rewritten, not annihilated. Humans wanted the galaxy to see their power, to understand their intelligence, and to fear the consequences of underestimation, but they also wanted the galaxy to understand restraint. They had survived extinction by being deliberate, and they were not about to lose that discipline now. The prisoners' accounts spread like wildfire through the galaxy. Alien officers shared the terrifying truth with each other in hushed tones. Traders and scientists passed the stories along in private networks. The Council itself was left with no illusions. Humans were not merely alive, they were the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever underestimated. And the most frightening part? Humans had not revealed their full strength. Every strike so far had been precise, controlled, and measured. The galaxy had seen only a fraction of their capability. Each fleet disabled, each system overridden, each station paralyzed was part of a deliberate strategy to teach the galaxy a lesson. Humans could strike anywhere, anytime, and with intelligence unmatched by any known species. The Council's fear turned to realization. Humanity's return was not just survival, it was reclamation. They had waited silently, observed the galaxy, learned its mistakes, and now they were teaching consequences. Every fleet immobilized, every system disrupted, every commander terrified, was a testament to centuries of preparation. Humans were no longer passive. They were deliberate. They were precise. They were unstoppable in ways the galaxy could barely comprehend. Across the outer sectors, alien commanders prepared for action, but hesitation spread like a virus. Who could fight a species that anticipated every move? Who could defend against an enemy who studied fleets, systems, and strategies for centuries before acting? Doubt gnawed at every officer. Fear twisted into awe. Respect mingled with terror. Back on Earth, humans continued to watch. They did not celebrate victories. They did not gloat over fear. They only waited, patient and deliberate, knowing that their moment to strike fully had not yet come. Every lesson, every disruption, every controlled intervention was part of a strategy far larger than the Council could comprehend. Humanity was teaching the galaxy what it meant to underestimate them. And for the first time in history, the Council understood a truth they could not escape. Humans were not extinct. Humans were not weak. Humans were not reckless. Humans were survivors, scholars of strategy, masters of patience, and arbiters of intelligence. They had returned. They had learned. And the galaxy had no idea what was coming next. The prisoner's testimony concluded with a final warning. Humanity did not act out of anger. They acted out of necessity, preparation, and foresight. They did not seek destruction, only recognition. And if the Council failed to remember this, the next lesson would be far more devastating. Silence fell over the Council chambers. Every leader understood the message, but none knew what to do. Humanity had spoken without words. They had taught without violence. And the galaxy, trembling and uncertain, realized that for centuries it had made the gravest mistake possible. It had underestimated humans. The Council could no longer deny it. Humanity had returned, not as myths, not as whispers, but as a force the galaxy could neither predict nor contain. Every fleet, every outpost, every system that had encountered humans bore the evidence of their intelligence, restraint, and precision. The Council was shaken, humiliated, and desperate. After centuries of underestimating humans, they finally understood the truth. A species they had written off was now shaping the fate of billions. Panic turned to action. The Council convened its largest assembly in history, bringing together leaders, generals, and strategists from every sector. For the first time, their arguments were unified by one overwhelming emotion: fear. The humans were not just back, they were everywhere, invisible, untouchable, and undeniably powerful. It was decided, humanity must be struck before they could strike again. Fleets were mobilized, warships launched from every sector, command stations readied, and weapon systems prepared for deployment on an unprecedented scale. Every resource the Council could muster was thrown into a single plan, a plan to crush humanity before it grew stronger, before it could expand its reach, before it could claim the place in the galaxy that rightfully belonged to them. And yet, from the very first moment, humans anticipated it. As fleets moved towards sectors where humans had been reported, ships malfunctioned mid-jump. Hyperdrives stalled. Navigation systems looped endlessly. Sensors detected nothing, yet the fleets found themselves rerouted, delayed, and rendered ineffective before a single human could be seen. Weapons misfired in patterns that confounded engineers. Command protocols, thought to be unbreakable, collapsed without warning. Every fleet the Council deployed seemed to fight itself. Alien commanders panicked. Orders were ignored. Systems that should have responded in coordination failed. Pilots swore their instruments were lying to them. Ships collided in space without explanation. Entire squadrons were immobilized while humans remained unseen, silent, and deliberate. Across the galaxy, a terrifying realization spread: humans were not attacking blindly, they were controlling the battlefield without being present. The Council had prepared for war using every weapon, every fleet, every strategy in existence. Yet none of it mattered. Humanity had studied their methods, learned their weaknesses, and manipulated the outcomes before the Council even knew what had occurred. The first direct engagement came when a strike fleet attempted to intercept a reported human outpost near the Meris system. Hundreds of warships formed into attack formation, weapons primed, engines ready. And then, without warning, systems failed. Shields fluctuated uncontrollably. Weapons fired on empty coordinates. Communication arrays were overloaded. The fleet became paralyzed, drifting helplessly in space. Not a single human ship was in sight. The officers aboard screamed into voids of silence, unable to comprehend the precision of the invisible enemy. The Council realized with horror, humans did not need numbers. They did not need weapons. They did not even need to be seen to dominate a battle. Every fleet, every strategy, every expectation was anticipated, manipulated, and neutralized. Humans had turned the galaxy's greatest forces into puppets, and the Council had no idea how it had been done. Back on Earth, humans observed silently. Every movement of the Council fleets, every failed attack, every moment of hesitation was recorded. They did not gloat, did not celebrate, did not speak. Humans acted with discipline, with patience, with foresight. Their victories were not for pride, they were proof of centuries of preparation, learning, and survival. As fleets continued to struggle, Council leaders became desperate. They attempted coordination on an unprecedented scale, linking sectors, pooling fleets, and creating redundancies. Yet humans anticipated it all. Systems failed in synchronized patterns. Weapons misfired precisely when needed most. Navigation grids collapsed exactly when fleets attempted to converge. Every attempt at retaliation was met with calm, invisible, and deliberate resistance. In the chaos, some commanders attempted to reason. "We cannot fight what we cannot see," they said. "We cannot strike what anticipates every move." Others shouted for total war, for weapons of mass destruction, for reckless assault. But the humans did not fight recklessly. They fought with intelligence and control. The galaxy's greatest fleets were being humbled, not by brute force, but by mastery. For civilians observing from planets and colonies, fear gripped hearts. They saw fleets immobilized, weapons misfiring, stations paralyzed. Yet there were no massacres, no destruction, no cries of death. Humanity's message was clear: they were powerful, but they were not cruel. Their strength lay not in annihilation, but in intelligence, precision, and restraint. The Council, desperate and humiliated, tried to change strategy. Orders were issued, revised, and ignored by systems that had been subtly reprogrammed. Fleets once confident became fearful. Officers hesitated. Pilots questioned their instruments. And everywhere, humans remained unseen, invisible, patient, deliberate. By the end of the first phase of the Council's counterattack, a single truth had been established across the galaxy: humanity was no longer a species to underestimate. They had survived extinction, hidden for centuries, and learned every lesson the galaxy could teach. They had turned fear into control, observation into weaponry, patience into power. And the Council, once confident in its fleets and strategy, had discovered a terrifying reality. No amount of numbers, no amount of weaponry, no amount of coordination could overcome a species that had mastered patience, intelligence, and foresight. Humans did not strike blindly, they controlled the battlefield without stepping onto it. They did not destroy, they demonstrated. They did not fight for pride, they fought for survival and respect. Across space, alien commanders whispered in disbelief. Across the Council, leaders trembled in fear. Across colonies, civilians whispered stories of an unseen force, a species once forgotten, now returned with unmatched precision and intelligence. Humanity had shown its depth. Humanity had shown its power. Humanity had revealed the consequence of underestimation. And somewhere, hidden in the stars, humanity watched. Every failure of the Council, every hesitation of their fleets, every panic-stricken decision was recorded. The humans did not act recklessly. They acted deliberately, measuredly, perfectly. They had waited centuries for this moment. They had learned. They had prepared. They had returned. The Council's first strike against humanity had failed. Entire fleets had been neutralized, not by force, but by calculation. Entire systems had been paralyzed without a single human appearing. And the galaxy finally realized the terrifying truth: Humans were back, and the Council had no idea how to stop them. Silence returned to the empty void of space, but it was no longer peace. It was tension. It was fear. It was the knowledge that humanity, patient, silent, and unseen, had taken control of the battlefield before the Council even knew it existed. And humanity was only beginning to show its depth. The galaxy had never known fear like this. Not since the great wars that had reshaped entire sectors, not since the first empires rose and fell, had any species felt a terror so complete. And yet, fear was not born of fire or destruction. It was born of knowledge, knowledge that a species thought extinct had returned, hidden, silent, and unstoppable. Every Council fleet sent into the outer sectors now moved with hesitation. Commanders double-checked every order, every trajectory, every system. Pilots questioned their instruments, engineers doubted their own calculations. Every routine mission became a nightmare of uncertainty. Humanity had returned not to announce themselves, not to declare war, but to show the galaxy that even the most advanced technology could be rendered useless by intelligence, patience, and observation. In the Nereus sector, a fleet of the Council's finest warships attempted to establish a perimeter. Hundreds of vessels, armed with the latest weapons, shields raised, hyperdrives ready. And yet, as soon as they approached the outer rim, systems began failing. Navigation grids collapsed. Weapon systems fired at empty coordinates. Engines stalled mid-jump. Communication networks became unreadable. Officers stared at their displays in disbelief, realizing they were no longer in control. It was not a battle. It was a lesson. Some fleet commanders attempted to engage, desperate to strike at an unseen enemy. Every maneuver was anticipated. Every formation disrupted. Ships collided in space, not by accident but by design. Entire squadrons were immobilized, and yet, no human fleet was in sight. They had turned fear into a weapon, patience into a strategy, and observation into dominance. The Council had thought humans were weak, but they had never considered the power of restraint. Meanwhile, the Council's chambers descended into chaos. Leaders shouted, argued, and threatened each other, searching for a solution to a problem that could not be solved with weapons alone. They had mobilized entire fleets, deployed centuries of technological innovation, and yet humanity had shown them that their might was irrelevant. Every failure of the fleets reinforced the terrifying truth: humans were beyond traditional understanding, beyond conventional warfare, and beyond prediction. In the outermost systems, scattered colonies reported anomalies that defied explanation. Automated defenses turned against their own operators. Mining stations shut down inexplicably. Communication hubs distorted signals into patterns that no translator could decode. Every disruption, every malfunction, carried the same signature: intelligence, calculation, restraint. The humans were teaching the galaxy that power did not always lie in destruction, it lay in knowledge, patience, and understanding. The Council attempted diplomacy. Messages were sent through secure channels, urging humanity to reveal themselves, to negotiate, to avoid further conflict. Yet humans did not respond. They did not declare intentions, and they did not attack recklessly. Their presence was felt through results, not words. They were everywhere and nowhere, controlling outcomes from the shadows, unseen yet undeniable. Captured alien commanders told stories that spread like wildfire. They described humans who could anticipate movements, who adapted instantly, and who acted with a precision that seemed almost impossible. Entire fleets were rendered ineffective not by force, but by calculation. Officers spoke of systems behaving as if they had a mind of their own, systems rewritten mid-operation by a force no one could see. Every report reinforced the same truth: humans had survived extinction and had returned with a mastery the galaxy could not comprehend. Fear now ruled every corner of the Council's influence. Strategic decisions became paralyzed by doubt. Fleets hesitated to act. Officers debated endlessly, unsure whether to advance or retreat. Even the most seasoned commanders questioned their own experience. Humanity had taken the galaxy's confidence and stripped it away with nothing more than silence, patience, and intelligence. Back on Earth, humans watched. Every failure, every hesitation, every misstep of the Council was recorded. Humans did not celebrate victories. They did not gloat. They were calm, deliberate, and precise. Every strike, every disruption, every anomaly was part of a strategy centuries in the making. They had waited, hidden, and learned. And now, the galaxy was beginning to understand the consequences of underestimating them. In one of the Council's most secure sectors, a fleet attempted a coordinated counterattack. Hundreds of warships moved in formation, weapons primed, shields active. And yet, as they approached their target, engines failed mid-jump, navigation grids collapsed, and communication arrays looped endlessly. Systems that had been trusted for centuries betrayed their operators. Officers screamed into silence, realizing that they were not facing an enemy in the conventional sense, they were facing mastery. Humans had not revealed their full power. What the galaxy had witnessed so far was only a demonstration, a warning, a message. They had disabled fleets, paralyzed stations, and taught lessons without shedding unnecessary blood. They had returned not for revenge, but to reclaim a place in the galaxy that had long forgotten them. Their patience, their calculation, their intelligence, and their restraint had become their greatest weapons. And the Council, paralyzed and terrified, could only watch. Every fleet immobilized, every outpost disabled, every command structure disrupted, reinforced the terrifying reality: humans were no longer to be underestimated. They were patient. They were intelligent. They were deliberate. And they were everywhere, unseen, waiting, preparing for the moment when the galaxy would finally meet them fully. Silence had teeth. Observation had power. Patience had become the deadliest weapon in the galaxy. For the first time in history, the Council understood something it had long refused to admit: humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Council had grown desperate. Weeks of failed fleets, paralyzed stations, and disabled systems had left them shaken, humiliated, and fearful. For the first time in centuries, they considered using their ultimate weapon, a device so powerful it had been designed to annihilate entire planets in seconds. It was called the Oblivion Cannon, a doomsday construct buried deep within the volcanic core of a secret moon. No civilization had dared use it for generations. It was feared even by the Council itself. And now, against humans, they believed it was their only hope. Preparations began in secrecy. Fleets escorted the weapons carriers, shielded by countless warships. The Council assembled a team of their finest engineers and strategists. Every precaution was taken to ensure the humans would not interfere, except, of course, they already had. Humanity had anticipated the move before a single warship left the orbital docks. Sensors detected anomalies in the space surrounding the weapon. Communications scrambled. Engines misfired. Navigation systems behaved as if alive, rerouting fleets into impossible positions, delaying arrival by hours. Engineers swore they had followed every protocol correctly, yet every system seemed manipulated. The humans had arrived without arriving. They were controlling the battlefield silently, invisibly, perfectly. When the weapon was finally activated, the first wave of Council commanders held their breath. The cannon roared to life, its immense energy building, threatening to reduce Earth to dust in a single strike. And yet, even as the energy reached its maximum, it faltered. Systems went offline mid-charge. Shields around Earth shimmered, absorbing what should have been instant destruction. Fleets scrambled to adjust targeting arrays. Communications were jammed in patterns engineers could not decode. The humans had intervened, and the Council realized with terror that their ultimate weapon had failed. Panic spread across the Council's chambers. Leaders shouted orders that no fleet could follow. Engineers worked frantically, trying to regain control. But every attempt to override the interference failed. It was not a malfunction. It was mastery. Humanity had turned the Council's deadliest weapon against itself, neutralizing it without a single human firing a shot. The galaxy watched in disbelief. How could a species that had been considered extinct manipulate a weapon so immense with such precision? On Earth, humans observed calmly. Commanders monitored every fleet movement, every system, every Council attempt to regain control. And still, they did nothing aggressively. They did not strike with the cannon. They did not destroy fleets. They simply neutralized, calculated, and waited. Their patience was absolute. Their intelligence was overwhelming. Their restraint was terrifying. Humanity had faced extinction before. They had learned the cost of desperation, and now they were demonstrating it to the galaxy. The first report from the outer fleets described chaos beyond comprehension. Ships fired weapons into the void. Hyperdrives stalled mid-jump. Fleets collided. Commanders screamed into silence as the very systems they trusted betrayed them. Every failure carried the invisible signature of humans, and for the first time, the Council realized something that chilled them to their cores: humans had prepared for everything. Every trap, every weapon, every maneuver the Council had planned was already countered, already anticipated, already rendered useless. Civilian populations watched from distant planets. Rumors spread of the greatest weapon ever created, rendered powerless before Earth itself. Panic, awe, and fear spread simultaneously. Traders whispered about humans capable of controlling fleets and weapons from across light years. Scientists debated whether the humans had mastered technology the galaxy could barely imagine. And soldiers, forced to watch their own weapons fail, trembled. Humanity did not fight with anger or destruction, they fought with precision, intelligence, and patience, and that alone was enough to terrify the galaxy. Council leaders were in disarray. Some wanted to retreat, to regroup, to plan anew. Others demanded immediate retaliation, ignoring that every attempt to strike would be anticipated and countered. Shouts filled the chambers, threats were made, and blame flew like wildfire. And still, humans remained unseen, silent, deliberate, watching, learning, preparing. The humans had proven something terrifyingly clear: they did not need brute force. They did not need numbers. They did not need to be seen. All they required was intelligence, preparation, and patience. Even the galaxy's most destructive weapon could not harm them, because they had anticipated it, understood it, and neutralized it before it could fire. And Earth itself remained untouched. Cities thrummed with life. Engineers continued their work. Pilots trained in silence. Families went about their lives, oblivious to the immense weapon aimed at their planet. The humans had survived extinction once. They had waited centuries, grown stronger in secret, and now they were untouchable. The Council's arrogance, its weapons, its fleets, all of it had failed. Humanity had turned fear into control, patience into power, and intelligence into an unstoppable force. The Council stared at Earth, shaken to its core. The galaxy realized, in hushed whispers and frantic reports, that humans were no longer a species to underestimate. They were invisible yet omnipresent. Silent yet deadly. Patient yet unstoppable. The Oblivion Cannon had failed not because it was weak, but because humans were stronger, smarter, and beyond prediction. And somewhere in the silence of space, humanity watched. They did not celebrate. They did not gloat. They simply observed, calculated, and waited. For the first time, the galaxy understood a truth it could not ignore. The humans who had survived extinction were no longer merely hidden. They were masters, and their moment had only just begun. For the first time in centuries, humanity faced true peril. The Council, humiliated but not defeated, had regrouped in secret. They unleashed everything they had left: fleets, war machines, and strategies designed to obliterate Earth itself. Hundreds of warships, armed with the deadliest weapons in the galaxy, advanced on the Sol system. The outer planets trembled under their engines' power. The air above populated colonies buzzed with tension. Humanity had shown patience, restraint, and intelligence, but now the galaxy sought to crush them in a single, decisive strike. Reports from the outer sectors arrived like omens. Fleets approached Earth, but strange anomalies began immediately. Communications were scrambled. Weapons misfired. Engines stalled mid-jump. Yet this time, the humans could not see everything in advance. The Council had prepared contingencies, coordinated fleets with precision, and attempted to overwhelm Earth in ways humans had not anticipated. Humanity's calm, silent observation was about to be tested. On Earth, alarm sirens echoed through military command centers. Pilots rushed to their stations. Engineers worked frantically, analyzing the incoming fleets, recalculating defensive maneuvers, and preparing countermeasures. Civilians were evacuated to underground shelters, though many watched the sky from their windows, knowing their planet faced the greatest danger in millennia. This was humanity's darkest hour, yet not a single person panicked beyond reason. They had survived before. They had prepared for this. And they would not falter now. The first wave of Council fleets entered orbit. Massive warships bristling with energy cannons and missile pods formed a barrier around Earth. The humans had predicted many of the Council's maneuvers, Yet some strategies were new, unexpected, and incredibly dangerous. Weapons fired across space, beams of energy cutting through voids with devastating precision. Fleets of smaller ships swarmed toward the planets, each carrying destructive payloads capable of erasing entire cities. Humanity's defenses were tested like never before. Yet humans adapted instantly. Fleets of Earth's-own ships, smaller and more agile, darted between massive energy beams, redirecting attacks with precision. Engineers recalibrated weapon systems mid-battle, turning incoming fire back against the attackers. Strategic satellites activated in unison, creating shields, diversions, and traps. Even when the Council's weapons seemed unstoppable, humans found openings, exploited weaknesses, and struck with calculated force. Every move, every maneuver, every adjustment was deliberate, intelligent, and precise. On the front lines, pilots faced unimaginable pressure. Their hands shook as they piloted ships through chaotic energy fields. Explosions rocked the void. Systems that had functioned perfectly moments before failed without warning. Yet the pilots did not waver. They adapted. They remembered. They survived. Humanity had trained for centuries not only in technology and weapons but in endurance, resilience, and strategy. Every person, every soldier, every civilian had a role to play, and together they turned desperation into strength. The Council's commanders watched in disbelief. Their most advanced fleets, their deadliest weapons, their coordinated strategies, everything was failing. Ships collided, energy beams misfired, communications broke down, and chaos spread through their formations. Every misstep the Council made had been anticipated, and now even their contingency plans were neutralized. Humanity had prepared for centuries to survive attacks like this. They had survived worse, and they would survive again. Deep in Earth's command center, leaders coordinated defenses with icy precision. No panic. No emotion beyond focus. Engineers rerouted power to shields. Pilots executed evasive maneuvers with split-second timing. Weapons fired only when success was guaranteed. Civilians contributed, operating support systems, tending to wounded soldiers, and maintaining communication links. Humanity fought as one organism, every part perfectly synchronized. The Council escalated further, deploying experimental weapons capable of devastating entire continents. Massive warheads lit the void as they accelerated toward Earth. For a moment, it seemed as if nothing could stop them. Humanity's defenses were overwhelmed at the edges, and cracks appeared in the planetary shield. Alarm sirens blared across command centers. Pilots shouted into radios. Engineers typed commands frantically. Yet humanity adapted instantly. Shields were reinforced mid-impact. Energy was redistributed. Countermeasures activated automatically. The warheads detonated harmlessly in orbit, neutralized by precision humans had anticipated centuries ago. Every passing moment was a test of endurance, intelligence, and strategy. Humanity faced annihilation but did not break. They remembered every lesson learned from centuries of survival. Every system, every ship, every soldier operated as one, executing moves honed over generations. The galaxy could bring its greatest force, and yet Earth remained standing. Humanity had turned desperation into triumph, chaos into control. Even as fleets pressed forward, even as weapons blazed through the void, humans did not panic. They did not surrender. They did not act recklessly. They adapted, calculated, and survived. Every strike of the Council had been anticipated. Every plan of attack had a counter. Every moment of fear had been transformed into strategy. Humanity had survived extinction before, and now, in their darkest hour, they proved they could survive even the greatest threat the galaxy had ever unleashed. The Council's commanders realized, too late, that the humans were more than fighters. They were survivors, masters of strategy, and scholars of patience. Every fleet disabled, every weapon neutralized, every maneuver countered had been part of a single plan: to survive, to endure, and to teach the galaxy that humanity could never be underestimated again. As the battle raged, Earth remained unbroken. Cities hummed with life. Civilians and soldiers alike fought in unity, proving that humanity's greatest weapon was not its ships or its technology, it was its people. Endurance, intelligence, and unity made them stronger than any fleet, sharper than any weapon, and more resilient than any enemy. When the last wave of Council fleets began to retreat, battered and bewildered, the galaxy realized a terrifying truth. Humans had survived annihilation, and they had emerged stronger, smarter, and more united than ever. Humanity's darkest hour had become its defining moment. The Council would never forget it. The galaxy would never forget it. Humanity had returned from silence, survived the impossible, and shown that no force could crush a species that had learned to endure, adapt, and unite. The galaxy had watched humanity survive its darkest hour, but now the story was changing. Humanity was no longer merely defending, it was preparing to reclaim the stars. Every fleet that had once attacked them was now broken, demoralized, and scattered. Every Council strategy that had seemed unstoppable now lay in ruins. Humanity had endured, adapted, and learned, not just from the past centuries, but from the mistakes the galaxy itself had made. Commanders on Earth coordinated the next phase with absolute precision. Sensors monitored the weakened fleets of the Council, mapping every malfunction, every hesitation, every misstep. Pilots trained in secrecy now struck with confidence. Engineers activated systems that had been dormant for decades, long-hidden technologies humanity had perfected in preparation for this moment. And the civilians, once sheltered, now contributed to the defense effort, operating support systems, maintaining energy grids, and relaying critical information. Humanity fought as a single entity, united in mind, body, and purpose. The first counterattack was surgical. Council fleets approaching the outer planets found themselves trapped in zones where engines failed, sensors malfunctioned, and weapons misfired. Ships that had once intimidated entire star systems became helpless targets. Humanity struck precisely, disabling without destroying, neutralizing without killing unnecessarily. The galaxy had never seen warfare conducted with such discipline, such intelligence, and such restraint. The Council's leaders panicked. Reports poured in from every sector, fleets immobilized, warships surrendered control to invisible forces, command stations overwritten, and communication networks hijacked. It became clear that humans had turned the battlefield into a web of traps, contingencies, and lessons. Every move the Council made was anticipated and countered. For the first time, the galaxy realized that it was not humans who were vulnerable, it was everyone else. Deep in Earth's command centers, strategists reviewed every piece of data. They did not rejoice. They did not gloat. They calculated, observed, and planned. Every Council error, every fleet failure, every moment of hesitation became part of the next stage. Humanity was patient. Humanity was intelligent. Humanity was deliberate. And now, it was ready to strike back fully. The first wave of counterattacks was swift and devastating. Small, agile fleets struck Council supply lines, disabling stations, rerouting energy grids, and neutralizing weapon depots. Every action was calculated to minimize loss of life while maximizing strategic advantage. Council commanders were left scrambling, unable to understand how their own technology had been turned against them. Ships that had once seemed invincible now drifted helplessly in orbit, immobilized by human precision and strategy. Meanwhile, the human's presence was felt across the galaxy in ways that were almost invisible. Communication networks broadcast messages encoded in patterns the Council could not interpret. Fleets encountered anomalies that prevented coordination. Research facilities found their experiments disrupted in ways that were precise, calculated, and non-lethal. Humanity was not just fighting, it was teaching. Every strike, every disruption, every controlled intervention was part of a single lesson. The galaxy had underestimated them, and it would never do so again. Civilians on distant colonies watched in awe and fear as humans reclaimed space once lost to the Council's tyranny. Entire planets were freed from the shadow of occupation. Energy grids restored, fleets repaired, and resources returned to those who had been trapped under the Council's authority. Humanity's power was undeniable, yet it was exercised with restraint. They destroyed only what was necessary to prevent further suffering. They struck not for revenge, but for justice, survival, and recognition. The Council's fleet attempted a coordinated countermeasure. Hundreds of warships converged to attack key human positions. Weapons roared. Missiles blazed through space. Energy beams cut across voids. And yet, humanity responded with flawless precision. Fleets moved unpredictably yet purposefully, systems rerouted energy to shields in seconds, weapons disabled incoming attacks without hesitation. Every council maneuver was anticipated. Every strategy was countered. Humanity had turned knowledge into a weapon, intelligence into armor, and patience into an unstoppable force. Alien commanders whispered stories of fear and awe. They described humans who could anticipate attacks, manipulate systems without being present, and strike with precision that seemed impossible. Entire fleets that had once been feared across the galaxy were immobilized, neutralized, or rerouted without a single human being in sight. Civilians who had survived previous council rule now saw humanity not as soldiers, but as protectors, scholars, and strategists. And then, the final moment of the first major counteroffensive arrived. A massive council warship, flagship of the invading fleet, attempted a last-ditch assault on Earth. Its weapons fired in unison, a concentrated torrent of destruction aimed at the planet. Humanity responded with absolute precision. Shields activated, energy fields rerouted, weapon systems neutralized the attack, and the flagship was rendered powerless mid-assault. Not a single human life was lost. Not a single city was destroyed. Humanity had survived the ultimate assault, turning fear into triumph, chaos into strategy, and desperation into opportunity. The Council could only watch in disbelief. Every fleet they had relied upon, every weapon they had trusted, every strategy they had perfected over centuries had failed. Humans had survived annihilation. Humans had endured the impossible. Humans had turned defense into offense, restraint into mastery, and patience into power. And as the Council faltered, humanity's message became clear across the galaxy. They were not extinct. They were not weak. They were not reckless. They had returned, silent, patient, and unstoppable. Every move, every plan, every fleet had been anticipated. The galaxy had learned the cost of underestimating humanity. For the first time, humans had seized the initiative. The dark tide of the Council's power had been halted. Humanity was no longer merely surviving. Humanity was reclaiming its place among the stars, proving that intelligence, patience, and unity were stronger than fleets, weapons, or fear. The galaxy would never forget the moment when humanity turned the tide. The galaxy held its breath. Every system, every fleet, every planet watched as humanity prepared for the final chapter. The Council, shaken to its core, had rallied its remaining forces for one last desperate assault. Their pride, their fear, and their authority all depended on victory. Entire sectors were mobilized. Warships bristled with the deadliest weapons. Energy cannons glowed with lethal intensity. Strategic stations coordinated attacks that were meant to overwhelm humanity once and for all. The humans had survived countless attempts to destroy them, but now the Council's desperation would test them like never before. On Earth, the humans did not panic. Command centers hummed with calm precision. Every fleet, every weapon, every civilian was coordinated as a single entity. Humans had waited centuries for this moment. Every trial, every lesson, every hardship had prepared them for the ultimate confrontation. And now, as the Council's fleets approached, they acted not with anger, but with absolute clarity. Every move was deliberate. Every response calculated. Every strike precise. The first wave of Council fleets launched its assault. Energy beams tore through space. Warships fired missiles with the intent to annihilate. But the humans had anticipated every strategy, every formation, every weapon system. Shields shimmered as attacks struck and failed. Weapon systems were redirected mid-flight to disable incoming missiles. Fleets moved as if guided by a single mind, avoiding destruction with uncanny precision. The Council had planned everything, but humanity had already adapted to everything before it even happened. From orbit to the outer rim, fleets faltered. Warships collided, engines failed, and communication networks collapsed. Pilots screamed into silent radios as their instruments betrayed them. Engineers struggled to regain control, only to find systems defying their commands. Every maneuver the Council attempted was neutralized, not through brute force, but through intelligence, foresight, and discipline. Humanity had mastered patience, and now that patience became their greatest weapon. On the ground, civilians watched the sky with awe and fear. Cities hummed with activity as defense networks sprang into action. Energy grids redistributed power instantly. Satellites deployed in flawless timing. Pilots maneuvered through chaos like dancers, turning desperation into strategy, fear into action. Every human on Earth contributed, every mind working toward the same goal, survival and triumph. The Council had underestimated them for centuries. Now the galaxy would see the cost of that mistake. The Council's commanders grew frantic. Their ultimate weapon, a planet-devastating cannon, had been neutralized before it could fire. Their fleets were paralyzed. Communication lines failed. Systems that had been flawless betrayed them. Every hope for victory slipped through their fingers. And all the while, humans remained unseen, silent, and deliberate, striking with precision when the moment was right. Then came the decisive move. Humanity's fleets advanced, not blindly, but with perfect calculation. Small, agile ships struck key points in the Council's formation, disabling weapon systems and immobilizing warships. Strategic satellites fired with unerring accuracy, targeting engines, navigation arrays, and shields. The Council's forces, once confident, were now scattered, confused, and unable to coordinate. Humanity had turned defense into offense, patience into domination, intelligence into victory. Council leaders, watching from their chambers, could only tremble. Every fleet they had relied upon, every weapon they had trusted, every plan they had perfected had failed. Their authority, once unquestioned, was crumbling. Reports arrived of entire fleets surrendering control, warships drifting helplessly, and systems being neutralized with precision humans had anticipated centuries before. The galaxy began to whisper a truth no one could ignore. Humans had returned, and nothing could stand in their way. Earth itself remained untouched. Cities thrummed with life. Civilians and soldiers alike had fought together as one organism, united in purpose and unbreakable in will. The humans' greatest weapon was not their fleets or technology, it was their unity, their intelligence, and their patience. Every council strike, no matter how powerful, had been met with mastery and restraint. Humanity had survived extinction, endured every challenge, and now proved that they were unstoppable. The final moments of the battle were almost surreal. Council warships attempted desperate maneuvers, firing everything at once in a last-ditch effort. But humanity responded flawlessly. Fleets moved in perfect coordination. Weapons neutralized attacks before impact. Shields redistributed energy instantaneously. Every council calculation was anticipated. Every strategy countered. Not a single human life was lost. Not a single city was destroyed. The humans had turned fear into power, desperation into precision, and chaos into order. And then, the Council's final attempt collapsed. The fleets, scattered, paralyzed, and demoralized, withdrew. Stations that had once ruled entire sectors were left inactive. Commanders whispered of humans with fear and awe, realizing that their arrogance had been the greatest mistake in history. Humanity had endured, adapted, and emerged victorious, not through recklessness, not through brute force, but through patience, intelligence, and unity. The galaxy was silent. For the first time in millennia, every civilization paused, watching as humans reclaimed their place among the stars. They had survived extinction. They had endured centuries of observation and preparation. They had overcome the galaxy's deadliest fleets, its most advanced weapons, and its deepest strategies. Humanity had returned not as myths, not as whispers, but as masters of the galaxy. And humanity did not celebrate. They did not gloat. They observed, recorded, and prepared for what came next. For centuries, the galaxy had underestimated them. That mistake would never happen again. Humanity had shown the galaxy its strength, its intelligence, and its patience. They had survived annihilation, and now, the universe knew that Earth's people were a force beyond comprehension. The Council had fallen. The fleets had retreated. The galaxy had witnessed the impossible. Humans had struck with total force and perfect control, yet with discipline and restraint. And in that moment, one truth echoed across the stars: humanity was no longer to be underestimated, never again. The stars themselves seemed to watch as Earth stood victorious, silent, and unbroken. Humanity had returned. Humanity had endured. Humanity had won. And the galaxy would never forget it.